Good morning, everyone. How you guys doing? I have to say, I was really overwhelmed just a minute ago because, this is a planned family service. We do the second week of the month and the fifth weeks of the month. Our family, we've had to kind of call an audible because we weren't having enough teachers, and so we had to go, okay, let's close down second week. Let's make this an intentional family environment. So if you have kids in here, there are coloring sheets in the back. There's even one that will apply to the message I'll be sharing. But what I was really floored by this morning is, as I was standing in the back worshiping with you, there was a couple of really little guys with their parents that went back to the nursery and noticed there wasn't a teacher. So we have the classroom open that you can use, but at the same time, one of our youth walked in with their mom, and she said, "Mom, I think we should go and help." One of our youth saw a need, and now there's a nursery back there. So if you have a little one and you would like that option, it is available. And I'm not going to mention their names, but if you pop by that room on your way out, thank them, because that's special. Don't you agree? Seeing a need and then doing something about it, pretty cool thing. Okay, so my name is Kenny. I'm on the pastoral team here at Larkspur, and it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. These last few weeks and months, I've just been really overwhelmed by this space, and just feels like such a sweet environment. And I'm really happy you're here. I even grew this mustache for you. And no, I don't think it looks great. Someone told me it looked nice this morning, and I said, "You can't lie in church." I'm not going to point that person out either. But, so my name's Kenny. It's a pleasure to be with you. And we've been in this series, Inward, Outward. Have you guys been enjoying it? It's been really practical, right? Lots of really good tools on how to actually do this thing. And so we're focusing in on moments where the Lord acts and people respond. We're trying to learn from these stories and interactions so that we may inward know how much God shows his love for us, but outward respond to his love, grace, and mercy. So a key point and a theme that we've had through this series is this: our inward life with Jesus should produce outward fruit in us. Does that make sense? To simplify it, inward life, outward fruit. There have been many seasons of my life following Jesus where I've been incredibly selfish, and it's been all about this. It's been all for my benefit. But if we're really in pursuit of Jesus, there should be benefits of our inward life that overflow from us, that the fruit actually becomes an outward thing where it affects others. It affects the way we live our life. Inward life, outward fruit. Everyone say it with me. Inward life, outward fruit. So when I was 17, I had this really dramatic conversion experience. Started following Jesus, and he met me in that place. And I was very fortunate and blessed to be able to go to a Christian university, Azusa Pacific University. Anyone? I know my wife was there. Anyone else? Probably not. I knew I'd get one response. Woo, APU. And it gave me great opportunities to grow in understanding who I was as a follower of Jesus, and it allowed me opportunities to serve in unique ways that I never had before, ways to lead in ways that I had never even tried or thought I could. And so pretty much immediately when I got there, I went and visited this inner city ministry in Hollywood. And much like our youth volunteer this morning, realized I'm probably going to be leading this pretty quickly because there's not a lot of people jumping at the opportunity. So quickly I started going to this ministry and eventually took it over with my roommate. And we would go, we would load up a couple cars. At that point, there was only maybe 10 or 12 students that would go from Azusa, and we'd make the drive down to Hollywood. We would grab burgers at this place on Hollywood Boulevard and enjoy this walk to and from the site where we would do a drop-in youth program for inner city families, where families would have the freedom to come and bring their kids and know they were in a safe place for about 3 to 4 hours. If that doesn't make you want to sign up for kids ministry, it was intense, but it was so much fun because the kids really wanted to be there. And so this ministry, it became this amazing problem where growth just was insane, to the point that the number of students that would come with us, we outnumbered the number of students that would come to receive in the ministry. We ended up having 75 college students that would drive down every Friday night, give up part of their weekend, and do this thing. And one thing that I noticed as we would park in the parking lot of the ministry, we'd get there early, we'd walk down, we'd go to Sandy Burger, and we'd get these really cheap, not really good cheeseburgers, but it was great because we were in community and we were doing this wild thing, going downtown, and we would make this walk, have burgers, walk back, and we would do this ministry for a few hours. And over time, what I noticed was, being Friday night in Hollywood, anyone been to Hollywood on a Friday night? What I noticed was we would continue to pass by similar people each week after week, and I started to notice our students became increasingly uncomfortable with the types of people that you walk by on Hollywood Boulevard on a Friday night. And quickly, what used to be joy for me when I would go to bed on Friday night after seeing all these students enjoy ministry and engage children, I started to struggle to fall asleep because I would be reminded of the way that they would look at people or the way people would feel rejected when we would walk past them. And it turned into this thing where my roommate and I, we were just what are we supposed to do? We have too many people to serve these kids. We don't need 75 students to serve 30 children. What if we started doing a inner city outreach and we started doing street ministry at the same time? We thought it was a great idea. When we first pitched it to the students at APU, we gave them the option. At the same time, you can either go out with me on the street or you can stay with my roommate and you can stay with the kids. And my roommate and I, we would rotate each week. We would swap which one we would lead. And guess how many people we had the first week with me? 2. We had a Chinese foreign exchange student that didn't speak any English, and the tiniest college senior girl that I've ever seen in my life. It was pretty funny, actually. It's the first time I had ever had carbonated milk. Apparently that's a pretty big thing in Asian cultures. It was actually pretty good. But it was mostly wandering around, not knowing what to do. And that night changed my life. Because the next 5 years, I'm an overachiever, it took me 5 years to finish college. Thank you. The next 5 years of my life, I could not get enough of being with those people. They went from someone that I had pity on to people that I called my friends. Friday nights weren't enough anymore. It became Saturday afternoons. I would find gaps in my schedule during the week and I'd meet them. We'd go to a movie. We'd meet at the park and play chess. We'd go to the library and look up resources. It became almost like life partners. And for me, one of the hardest things about that experience, that season of my life, it actually broke me for that type of ministry because one of the things that would happen consistently is you'd get so close with someone, they'd let you in on the reasons they were on the street. They'd let you in on the reasons why they were addicted. They'd let you in on the reasons that their families were broken. And you'd try to connect them to resources, and you'd spend weeks, months, years trying to convince them to get help. You'd try to get them on a list to get into a shelter, to get into a clinic, to get in for some sort of help, even to the point that I would drive them to the door. Everything's in place. And in that last moment, the fear of what might change would make them say no. And I would take them back and drop them off in the same environment that left them broken week after week. So I would go and I would talk to counselors at our school. I would talk to faith leaders in our school, and I would express this brokenness I felt. Why? Why aren't they receiving this? Why aren't they taking advantage? Why am I so broken? and I'm assuming this phrase you've probably heard before, is well-meaning people. They would say something to the effect of, God only helps those people that help themselves. You might even hear that phrase and you might be thinking, isn't that in the Bible? Like, that sounds kind of wise. It's actually not. It's not really a biblical principle. And it's something that I think we say when we want to detach ourselves and give an excuse. And what I've had to learn is, when I study the Bible and I look at the God of the Bible we read, and the Jesus that we're desperately trying to follow and be like, he actually often helps those that are completely helpless. That was me. It's not about what I did. So, today, we're going to be looking at a story where Jesus pours out his grace and mercy on a helpless person. Would you pray with me? Lord, we come to you now and we submit ourselves before you. Lord, I pray that these things that have been so deeply on my heart this week, Lord, that you would help my words connect and my thoughts connect, and Lord, that you would speak, that you would make our hearts like fertile soil to receive. Ultimately, Lord, whatever it is that you want to speak today. Amen. Do you want to get well? Our passage today is from the Gospel of John, chapter 5, and I'm going to read from verse 1 to 14, if you want to join me. In my Bible, it's titled, The Healing at the Pool. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is a Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Okay, the pool at Bethesda. There's a picture. There's a kind of a remodeling of what it would have looked like then. It's 2 pools surrounded by 5 colonnades or porches. On the far right is the north side, left is south, and then you can figure out the rest. So you have the north, south, east, and west, and then you have a colonnade that runs through the middle between the 2 pools. So what would happen is these colonnades or porches are basically covered patios where people that were not well, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed that we read about, would lay or take up space under these covered patios. The pool was also busy with people that would be doing ceremonial bathing, that would go to purify themselves, because the temple is actually just south of this pool. So you would have people that would be coming in to bathe that are kind of like passersby, and then you would have these sick people that would basically be like residents of the pool. It was a really unique environment, if you can picture it. A more appropriate name, though, because in Hebrew, it actually means house of mercy, Bethesda. A more appropriate name would probably be more like house of pain or house of brokenness. Because if you can think about it, it's not like there's a big walkway in the middle of those pools. It's water. So if you were to go in and bathe, you would be literally stepping over, walking by, walking through huddled, broken people. So why were these people there? There's this interesting thing. I don't know if anyone in their Bible, I read from the NIV, if you notice anything missing between verse 3 and verse 5. If you look in your Bible, you might notice that verse 4 is not actually in the paragraph, but it's rather listed as a footnote. So let's read verse 4, which is located in your footnotes. I don't always read from New King James Version, but when I do, it's to find John 5:4. Thank you. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. So while this verse isn't in some of the earliest manuscripts, scribes often kept this as a footnote, or even in some of your translations, if you read like New King James, King James, there's 2 or 3 others that will have it actually within the body of the paragraph. The scribes have left it in the footnotes because it's really important, in my opinion, for cultural relevance. Because when we look at this, if we think people are literally living at these pools, and I think it's in verse 7, it actually talks about when the waters were stirred, I can't get in first, right? People were literally waiting for the water to be disrupted, and then they would fight to be the first one in the pool, because the legend was that the angel of the Lord would stir the water, and the first one to touch that water would be healed. Can you imagine? I really struggle to even picture what it would be like to have been there for that long, fighting to get into that water with the desperate hope that you would be healed, but to continue to fail. But in this mass of people, we see that Jesus enters this space. And rather than seeing the mass of people, he sees one. Verse 5. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. This man, likely paralyzed, had been in that state for 38 years. And while we don't know exactly how long he'd been waiting at the pool, we can probably picture it was a pretty long time. In my mind, I'm thinking maybe he had family that took care of him, but maybe to a certain point that they couldn't anymore. Maybe he was left there. Maybe he had friends that he could ask, can you bring me to the pool? But we know he was there for a long time. That even is after the fact that he's been living paralyzed for 38 years. So maybe since the pool, his world was by the pool. The space that his mat took up, the small portion of the patio. Likely he would beg for a living. the people that would come for ceremonial bathing, they weren't unhealthy. But just like my friends in college would pass by people on Hollywood Boulevard, you could probably assume that as they're walking through these masses of people that they would be asked for help. So his living came from there. Then suddenly, the water would stir, and it became every person for themselves. It actually makes me heartsore to think of the desperation. This man had never been first. At this point, it would be easy to assume that he had lost all hope of being healed. Bethesda, house of mercy, had lost all meaning to him. Hope of getting better was gone. Verse 6, when Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" What an interesting question. It's kind of odd, isn't it? I'm trying to picture asking someone that has been paralyzed for 38 years if they want to get well. Would you do that? My mind goes to scenes like an ICU unit or a NICU. It goes to places in South Africa that we've served where people are daily, monthly going to clinics to receive antiretroviral drugs for HIV. And they know they're going to have to do that for the rest of their life. I picture, Carla and I had the privilege of serving at Mother Teresa's Home for the Dying in Calcutta and serving those people that were there literally to die in dignity. I can't imagine asking them, "Do you want to get well?" I don't think this man is much different than what we could kind of imagine the scene to be. There's a weight to the question. It's not just rhetorical. There's a heaviness to it. But it makes me wonder, do you think that the people at the pool really did want to get well? I don't think Jesus would ask the question if there were options. This was their community. This is where their friends were. This is where they begged and provided for their needs. If Jesus healed this man, his entire life was going to change. He'd have to leave his community. He'd need to find a new way to make a living. Healing would move him out of what had become comfortable. Doesn't sound very comfortable, but if you put yourself in his position, I think he probably was used to his situation. Healing would flip the world he knew literally upside down. We are often better at holding on to things. We adapt to things. We get comfortable with things, even the things that keep us unwell. So when Jesus says to this man, "Do you want to get well?" it is actually pretty reasonable to think that this man might not have wanted his life to change that much. If Jesus asked you today, "Do you want to get well?" how would you respond? What are you needing to get well from? Maybe hurts from your past? A secret sin? An addiction you're battling? Bitterness that you can't let go of? Unrelenting depression? A struggling marriage? A chronic illness? Maybe a new diagnosis that you got this week. Carl and I were with a friend yesterday who's dealing with just coming to grips with a new diagnosis. And like most of us, she's kind of going, I'm fine. It's going to be okay. Jesus is offering for you to be healed, to be free, to overcome, to be released, to be restored, to be made whole, to be made physically well. How would you respond? Do you really want Jesus to heal and transform you? Can we be honest for a second? Sometimes it is easier to hold on to the hurt and the pain and the addiction. Sometimes it's easier because healing would require change. Submitting yourself to unknown consequences. While we know it would be for our good, what would it cost us? Let's look at the man's response. Verse 7. It says, "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." One thing I notice here is he really doesn't answer Jesus' question directly. Could be like a yes or a no. On the surface, it almost seems like he's justifying himself or making excuses, but I really don't think that's the case here. If we engage our empathy, once again, I think we're getting there. If I feel the tone of the room, I think we're getting there. But really engage your empathy, like click it on. Put ourselves in this man's shoes. Your world revolves around your mat and the space surrounding your mat on this portion of the patio. After years of countless attempts, you've never made it to the water. You've been paralyzed for 38 years, and one day, this day, out of the blue, a stranger comes up to you and says, "Do you want to get well?" I think his response is more indicative of, "I'd really like to get well, but I don't have anyone to help me. You don't know how hard I've tried. I've tried for so long and I can't do it on my own." I start to hear the hopelessness in his response now. The man didn't realize the stranger before him was Jesus. Hope for the hopeless. As Jesus looked at this man, listened to this man, and heard his story, it seems he was filled with compassion. He knew he had to do something, and Jesus says in verse 8, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." He doesn't say anything like, "Yeah, I understand, I know." He gives him a directive. Get up. Pick up your mat and walk. At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. What? Are you kidding? Get up, pick up your mat and walk. Why? Because this man wasn't coming back. He had been healed. His life was changed. And it was time for a fresh start. Jesus wasn't giving a directive or a command. He was giving him an invitation to new life. This moment of overwhelming compassion where I see Jesus blur the lines between inward life and outward fruit. When he displays his love for us, when he meets us in such a profound way that everything changes in an instant. It doesn't become about, well, I've been thinking about this and I've been growing and so now I'm going No, it's like, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. He is changed. He doesn't say, are you feeling, can you stand? He says, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. Inward life and outward fruit. We have to think of it as like two sides of the same coin. We can't have them separate. Does that make sense? So lately, I've been becoming increasingly aware of brokenness around me and people that are really suffering. And I would assume you guys would probably be able to relate to that. People are feeling helpless. I know some of your stories, even in this room, things you've been humble and courageous enough to share. And I have no doubt there's others in this room that are in similar places. The struggle you are in, the struggles that you see the people around you in, should make this story resonate with you. I kind of wonder, what if that was a question we asked people we cared about? Do you want to get well? So on the surface, when we read this story, we might not feel like we fit into any of these categories. I'm not blind, lame, or paralyzed. What I've been thinking about this week is how most of the things that we suffer with, the things that keep us down, the things that plague us, are not visible. You're not going to see them on an X-ray or CT scan or MRI, or you're not going to be able to look at your blood work and go, oh yeah, that's why my heart's broken. Can I just tell you that Jesus knows you? He knows your secret thought life. He knows what you're struggling with. He knows what you're wrestling with. And He's with you. And whether it's something that's external that we can all see, or something that you've buried deep within, He wants to deal with all of it. Do you want to get well? It's really cool. Sometimes, like, when I get a chance to talk in front of people, this isn't the cool part, I get so overwhelmed and burdened, and I get anxious about these moments. And what tends to center me, where Jesus brings me peace, is I think about the room. And there are 3 of you that are in the exact spot that I pictured you in. So just this morning, I feel like the Lord really led me into 2 specific thoughts of how I think we should respond today. I think we're supposed to respond to His Word. You know, we know that, and we believe that His Word is alive and active. And if Jesus wanted to do that then, why not now? Here's the two spaces that I think we can find ourselves. 1, maybe you've been waiting for this invitation. Maybe today is the day to trust Jesus and respond to the question, do you want to get well? And then get up, pick up your mat, and walk. Maybe you've never considered that idea. Maybe you've never actually been offered. You know you don't have to deal with that. You can give it to him. He can take it from you. We're getting close to the end, Trayvon. Sorry, I didn't really give you any warning. But now everyone's excited, or you just want me to keep talking. I had a goal. Either I'd try to go for the fastest sermon of the year, or if I blow it, then I'm just going to go for the longest. Thankfully, it will be somewhere in the middle. But here's number 2. This is where I am going to admit to you. When I spoke to you last time, I made a commitment. If any of you remember what that commitment was, I said that I will do my best to share vulnerably from what I am learning personally. Here's my moment of vulnerability. You ready? This really hit me hard this morning. I think that I have already responded to his question. I have said yes. Do you want to get well? Yes, I want to get well. Yes, Lord, I want to roll up my mat. I want to get up and I want to walk. But I was reminded, and I have a feeling you can resonate with this, that I have put that mat on my back. I carry it in my backpack. I walk around with it, and sometimes when I feel down, when I'm feeling attacked, when I'm feeling vulnerable, I remind myself, oh yeah, I still have my mat back there. Sometimes I take it out and I hold it like it's my emotional support mat. And I go, well, yeah, Jesus, I know you took this from me, but just for a few minutes. Sometimes I will even unroll it on the ground and I'll lay there. Just 5 minutes, Jesus, I just need to be in this spot again. For some reason, I trick myself that I need to be back down there, that I'm safer there in the thing that was comfortable before. So I know his invitation to me this week has been, where do I need to leave that mat that I can't take it out of my backpack? So I'm going to ask you one more time, do you want to get well? I'm going to ask you to think about, close your eyes for a minute, think about those two things. If you need to respond to do you want to get well, or do you need to actually remind yourself that the reason he told you to pick up that mat and walk is not so that you carry it, but that you hand it to him. Put it in his hands. What is that thing? Seriously, what is it? None of us can avoid this question. There's something. So Lord, I come to you now and I just want to ask that you would continue speaking. Lord, as we close in worship and as we spend time quiet before you, I pray that wherever these words have kind of opened space, that you would just push your way in. That you would just do what you want to do. And Lord, I know that just as this man had to respond, you asked him the question, but he actually had to physically get up when you told him, get up, pick up your mat and walk. You desire for us to respond to you. Lord, I'm sorry for the times that you speak to me that I just carry on, that I don't pay attention, that I don't respond. Lord, collectively, I pray that you would make today different. So as we worship, I would encourage you come forward, get prayer. Turn to your neighbor, get prayer. This is a time to respond. We do not have to continue carrying this mat. Thank you.